Hey, what is up mortals, Tim here. And before we get into today's video, I want to let you all know we have a merch store. Some of the items in it are only available for a limited amount of time, so if you're interested, go into the description and check it out. Each purchase helps us make more content. Now, with that out of the way, let's get into the video. Bakugou stared at his marred knuckles through wearied, tear-stained eyes. So this was what it's like to admit defeat, to be dismantled on the national stage so unceremoniously, and by someone admittedly far better. Every shaky, labored breath that he forced through his tightened jaw felt like another blow to his ego. Hearing himself sob like this for the first time in a year was almost as much of a devastating loss than the actual match. His friends had left him alone at his behest, so now the young man could toil over the unshakable feeling of unworthiness that permeated through his entire body. Was he a fraud? Was his tenacious, dogged nature all for naught? Bakugou drew one last deep breath and steeled himself as the final match was announced. He made his way out onto the balcony, where his classmates awaited him. Though the young man barely had enough time to find his seat before Todoroki, the man that had just humbled the blonde so wholeheartedly, turned tail and marched to the edge of the arena. A ball of dread formed in Bakugou's chest, his knuckles draining of their hue as he tightened his hands into fists. The crowd was ominously silent. His fellow classmates and everyone else watched with bated breath as the prodigal son, the monument to their quirk society, and the progeny of the number 2 hero stepped out of the ring without a fight. In a solemn show of pride, Shinzo raised a fist to the air and casually buried the other into his pocket. He smirked in a way more confident than malicious and sauntered off the stage. Bakugou's eyes drifted from the arena to the floor. The one that had beaten him had taken his own categorical defeat, and it was one without conflict. That bastard used his ability to make him stroll out of the ring like he didn't want to be there. Shinzo had played them like no other, and for his troubles, the general studies student had leveled veritable titans within the ranks of the most prestigious hero course in the nation, if not the world. Did he deserve it? Probably. The blonde adolescent didn't consider that though. All he could see was the nauseating fact that he, at best, was 3rd place, bronze. Resentment filled his form to the brim, and it was directed solely at himself. I'd like to introduce you to your newest classmate, though a few of you already made his acquaintance during the sports festival, Aizawa announced. It had been a few days since the event, and the last day before, the class would finally embark on their first hero internships. Despite this, apparently the faculty deemed it an appropriate time to include a new student in the 1A roster. Shinzo, please enter, he continued. The messy-haired boy obliged, stepping through the threshold and delivering a lukewarm nod toward his fellow students. Due to his exemplary performance in the tournament, Shinzo has earned the much-deserved right of being a hero course student. If you'd like, please feel free to introduce yourself to the class. Aizawa stepped away, giving the lavender-headed young man the stage. My name is Hitoshi Shinzo. I was in general studies before. My quirk is brainwashing, though I'm sure quite a few of you know that. My bad for taking you guys out, by the way. The tall, tired-eyed boy explained, his demeanor tepid and loose. His voice was deep and clear, certainly one meant for radio. The fact paired well with his ghastly ability. Some of the class met him with terrified stares, some with enraged glares, though many with enough sense to realize it was merely a competition regarded him with healthy respect fused with some percentage of trepidation. Bakugou felt conflicted with his instinctive feelings on the boy. He did what he had to do, but the sheer breadth of his capabilities felt so insurmountable. He effortlessly showed up the class's best. Students who had fought real villains and lived to tell the tale. The new student took his seat near the back of the classroom, finally filling the class to capacity. He filled the desk where that lecherous purple-haired dwarf would have sat if he hadn't been booted from the prestigious program on the first day due to his ineptitude, Bakugou thought. The kid's name slipped his mind. Looks like we're back to capacity, everyone. 20 students. Their teacher finished. His wounds were mostly healed now, primarily due to Recovery Girl's quirk. One of his dark eyes was punctuated by a small, crescent-shaped gash underlining it, a reminder of the class's precarious past. In other news, Aizawa stepped to the door to slide it open once more, allowing the sultry vixen known as Midnight to step through the threshold. You'll all be choosing your hero names today. I'll let Midnight take the reins for this one. As she briefly explained the weight and reasoning behind the exercise, Bakugou mulled over what he'd finally decide on, flashy names were never his thing. The young man always considered himself too pragmatic for some sort of bold mantle. One word continued to ruminate within the confines of his skull, a concept that summed up what he wanted to be. It was the title he had inadvertently given that endless, insurmountable pile of ambition that he carried on his back, like the Titan Atlas. This is what I came up with. Midoriya's voice brought Bakugou back from his meandering daydream. Etched across the small whiteboard was Esper, something that people often called him due to his prominence in popular culture. The atomic blonde expected something like that from his lifelong friend. He was always the nerdy type. Shinzo was up next. He strolled up to the podium with all the urgency of a sloth, jotting down his name without thinking. "I've known what my name is would be for a long, long time," he started, flipping the board around. "MK Ultra." Most of the class squinted in confusion, but it seemed like Momo knew precisely what he was talking about. She was a studious one. "Oh, like the CIA Black Ops mind control project." She chimed in, almost excited at the witty choice of a name. "Yeah, that." He smirked softly, his lip raising just enough to denote some semblance of vibrancy. With that information, the class, as well as Midnight, seemed impressed and strongly encouraged him to keep it. For a moment, if only that, a speck of optimism swirled around behind his lavender irises. Finally, it was Katsuki Bakugou's turn. "I had a hard time coming up with something, but I guess this works the best," he growled out, feigning apathy while scanning the classroom carefully for their reactions. He stagnated on Ida, Todoroki, and Uraraka the most. Bulwark. His hero name was Bulwark. Its definition originated as a defensive wall, though in his case, it served as a synonym for protector. Though he presented as a rowdy, waspish belligerent, he wanted to be something more than that. His time with All Might had been short compared to his restless life beforehand, but that minute period, working beneath his idol, had shaped and molded him into something he couldn't help but be proud of. The young man had a ways to go before he was the protector of the innocent he strived to be, but that wouldn't stop him from trying his damnedest. Defying the odds was something he had grown adept to. Uraraka approved. "It really fits you, Kachan," Midoriya agreed, nodding along with the bubbly teen. "That's badass! As manly as I'd expect from you, dude!" Kirishima bellowed. Shinzo even took a moment from his pensive stare out of the far rear window to glance his way, a sign of respect in his own way. The vast majority of the class, save for Ida and Todoroki, had something similar to say about his decision. Those two seemed especially sullen after the events of the sports festival, though the engine-legged boy had good reason. From what Bakugou could understand, his brother was irreparably disabled by a villain known as the Hero Killer. Midoriya mentioned that he would be going along with Ida to provide a bit of support and familiarity during the internships. They weren't terribly close, but for as long as the blonde could remember, that's exactly how his freckled-faced friend was. Midoriya always looked out for the people around him. Todoroki seemed more irritable than sad. It was resentment for sure. A resentment that led him to face his father head-on during the internships to show the number 2 hero that his power meant nothing, that he didn't need it, even if it was to save himself. His use of it against Bakugou was a fluke, a lapse of judgment, and a mistake made in the panic and turmoil of it all. It wouldn't happen again. The dual-quirked prodigy swore it wouldn't. At All Might's suggestion, the new hero-to-be Bulwark found himself outside of a grody, decrepit old tenement where one of the Symbol of Peace's former mentors apparently made his residence. Why he dwelled in a crude amalgam of chipped brick, fractured concrete, and dust-stained glass protected with bars and chain link eluded the young man. He glanced down at the torn parchment between his thumb and forefinger to make sure this was the right address. After quadruple checking to no avail, the teen apprehensively approached the front door and rapped his knuckles against its wooden surface. When nobody answered, he pulled it open and strolled right through, bull-headed as ever. "Hey, is this where it He stopped short, glaring down to find a squat old man pressed face down in a puddle of crimson. "What the hell?" As he took a defensive position, the elderly hero popped his head up and glanced at the boy with wily eyes. "I'm alive, don't worry." The geezer scrambled to his feet and glassed Bakugou head to toe, narrowing his eyes as they made contact with the boy's own. "Who are you? Why'd you stroll into my house?" Gran Torino inquired. He seemed jittery and frail, his body propped up by a cane nearly as tall as he was. Bakugou furrowed his brow. "Katsuki Bakugou, I'm from UA. Why are you lying in a bunch of..." He glanced down and made out the rest of the mess. Ketchup, some sausage links, and splintered porcelain. It looked like the old man tripped on himself. "What'd you say, Sonny? You're gonna have to speak up." He cupped a tiny, puffy hand around his ear. The The young man took note of the fact that he was already in his hero uniform. "Bakugou! All Might said you wanted to teach me!" he shouted. The elderly hero seemed taken aback by his bravado, physically recoiling from the change in tone. "That's a bit too loud, my boy. Almost busted out my eardrums. Only got the one good one left. Now, who'd you say you were?" "Bakugou." The teen reeled in the delivery for his new potential mentor's sake. "Toshinori?" His voice was raspy, nasally, world-weary. He certainly fit the stereotype of a washed-up old man, senile nature and all. Good God, old man. I'm gonna go call All Might real quick." This was turning out to be a bust. Setting his luggage down and turning away, the blonde started dialing away on his smartphone without any regard for the retired hero's feelings. "Why don't you come over here and knock me with a 1-2, kid?" Bakugou glanced over his shoulder to find the stubby old coot rifling through his hero costume. The teen slid his phone in his pocket and took a step toward him, peeling off his hoodie and tossing it to the side. "So, you're playing crazy to mess with me, huh? You really are All Might's teacher." The adolescent ground the knuckles of his fist into either side of his neck, loosening up the ligaments. No need to keep the old bastard waiting, he thought. Considering the dwarf-like stature of his opponent, the atomic blonde opted to begin with a sidekick aimed for Gran Torino's temple. Before his leg reached full extension, though, a wild burst of air pressure from the old man's feet shot him upwards. Bakugou barely had time to react, his shaded pupils only just keeping up with the veteran hero as he bolted to the wall and used it as leverage to deliver his own counter. The teen raised his arms to defend, but before Torino made contact, he changed his trajectory mid-air and launched up a few feet and came crashing down atop the blonde's head with a blazing fast dropkick. His neck sunk and scrunched, his spine compressed from the strike and caused his synapses and pain receptors to explode with reaction. As a knee-jerk instinctive response, he swiped at the old-timer's leg as he jolted up and out of the boy's range. "Is that all you got, kid? You're way too stationary. Move around a bit." Much to Bakugou's chagrin, his opponent had dug himself into the walls of the structure, thus securing the high ground and keeping strictly out of reach. "How do you expect to take on supervillains with entry-level Muay Thai and Jiu-Jitsu? Think you're more special than every martial artist in the world or something?" Bakugou growled, noticeably uprooted by the man's taunts. He scowled upward before loading his legs up and leaping at him, closing the distance at a deceptively quick pace. Though, as he went to land his attack, the veteran dashed away once more, and his white-knuckled fist came in contact with nothing but concrete. The blow buried his arm wrist-deep in the material, comfortably anchoring him into the wall and leveling the playing field. "That's more like it. A little rough around the edges, but exactly what I planned to teach you." Bakugou jumped at him again, desperately trying to land a front kick to no avail. "You're fast, kid, but far too grounded. You fight like a normal person, not a hero. If you want to beat that fire and ice kid that whooped you..." The young man cut him off with another flurry of attacks, all of them missing their mark by slimmer and slimmer margins. "You'll have to stop being a newbie and up that mobility. Even now it's so rough and unrefined. We'll keep this up all day if we have to." The seasoned veteran chuckled playfully. The young hero-to-be growled. And so they did. Hours and hours of cat and mouse, until the dog-eyed teen's twitching fingers were caked in blood. His knuckles had long since lost their calloused blanket of flesh. Every inch of him was worn, raw, sweating, and bleeding. He heaved, his broad shoulders rocking up and down like an ironclad warship out of the sea. Gran Torino regarded him with a smirk. "That was good." He took up his cane and started for his bedroom. The bastard was barely winded, Bakugou thought. "We'll keep this up until it's time for you to leave. Hopefully by then, you'll have it down good enough to kick some actual butt." From the time a sliver of the glowing celestial body ensconced in the sky came into view, until its final ember tapered out in the evening, the young man persevered and met every challenge the new mentor sent his way. The image of himself helplessly frozen in place with his hand cocked back in defiance kept flashing through his head every time he wavered. It would not happen again. He would not lose again. Be it for his sake, or for the sake of his friends, or for the sake of those in need. If he failed here, he might as well pack up and drop out now. Those people mattered more than his shortcomings. If Bulwark was to be his title, there could be no room for trepidation, no room for error, no room for failure. All right, let's go fight some villains. After days of vigorous, non-stop battle of attrition, this was all the old man had to say. It made the young man's scoff evolve into a soft laugh. "If you say so, you washed-up bastard," he muttered. Gran Torino prodded the teen's chest with his cane in response. "That's the spirit, kid. We'll head to Shibuya. since that's where some bigger fish might be swimming around at. The ride to the train station and the subsequent trek on the monorail burnt through most of the afternoon, leaving the back end of their journey for the dead of the night. The teen found himself glancing up at the crescent-shaped stone in the sky, idly rocking his head to and fro with his folded hand. Some concerned chatter from the back of the car caught his and Gran Torino's attention, bringing their attention to a billowing inferno several blocks away. Bakugou's jaw tightened. As the loudspeaker encouraged them to fasten their seatbelts, the silhouette of a man plunged through the wall of the train car and skidded across the floor. A spindly gray arm drawn taut with muscle followed suit, its thin fingers wrapping around the splinted metal to contort it further. It revealed its face. "A Nomu," the young man blurted out. The veteran hero silently placed a hand on his chest to signal him to sit as he launched at the beast full throttle. As he made contact, the Nomu was thrown from the confines of the bullet train and through a concrete wall, the air-powered hero hot in pursuit. As soon as the duo locked in conflict left his view, the blonde-haired ruffian leapt from his seat and made his way to the opening. As he reached it, a soft ping erupted from his pocket. He checked the message. It was from Midoriya. All it had was a location. Before we get back into this what if, I'd like to let you all know about our second channel, Animate Deep Dive. Animate Deep Dive is a channel-based variety on anime lore, which includes characters, timelines, and more. If you're interested in content like that, please click the icon in the top right corner, or check the description below for a link to the channel. The butcher towered over them with the full weight of his ideals behind him. His presence was suffocating, encompassing the entirety of the alleyway in a miasma of unfettered, murderous intent. Tears swelled in the eyes of the engine hero as the glistening edge of a blade leveled itself just ahead of his nose. Through those tears, those agonizing tears, all he could see were the cold, sharp eyes of a fanatic. "You're both cowards and hypocrites." His jaw strained at each utterance, his straight teeth glistening like shards of glass against the scrutiny of the moonlight. "You think of nothing but yourself, and you." His blade aimed at the green-haired boy, whose form knelt just behind Ida's sprawled-out body. A gash across his face oozed rivulets of bubbling crimson. "You approach something so serious with all the conviction of a lamb. You're lukewarm, a cowering little bystander, playing hero." Midoriya choked up, the words getting lodged in his throat like cotton. His lips quivered, every muscle in his body tensed up, but the paralysis didn't dissipate. He wanted to dig his fingers into the asphalt and lift himself up. He wanted to fight. This man had overpowered them so effortlessly, without a care in the world, and now they'd just be another statistic, a tally marking the way to his new world. "And now, you're both where you belong, groveling and pleading and regretting. Your deaths will spur on a better society, children," he hissed out from the floor of his chest. As his blade raised, his ears perked up to the sound of footsteps approaching. His almond-shaped eyes glared up to meet a new contender, with fire in his eyes and the stature of a warrior. Bakugou rushed headlong, colliding with the hero killer before he could react. Stain was knocked back, just enough for Bakugou to lodge himself between the villain and his disabled friends. Who's there?" Ida croaked, peering up at his classmate. "It's Kacchan!" Midoriya replied, almost triumphantly. Even this small victory had no hope of breaking the palpable tension in the air. "You thought you could kill some kids and get away with it, you son of a bitch!" the blonde barked, lowering his stance slightly and raising his arms for a fight. "Well, I'm their bulwark, you wide-eyed bastard. You'll have to get through me." Stain grinned. This is exactly what he wanted. "What a tenacious one you are. And you got some power to back it up. Maybe you're worthy of staying alive. I guess we'll have to see." Stain hunched over and drew his dominant leg back, leveling his katana horizontally as a defensive measure. His offhand slid a knife from its scabbard. Bakugou rolled his neck in place and glanced off to the side for a split second before leaping to the lip of a nearby dumpster, using it as a platform to grab onto the railing of a fire escape. He didn't stop there, though, instead making use of the momentum by flipping further into the night sky. He loaded his legs against the railing and launched himself forward like the projectile of a railgun. The steel beam warped from the force applied, and the air split enough to make a small, audible crack as he sent himself careening downwards at his target. The hero killer countered with a thrust that just barely skidded past the boy's cheek and extended parallel against his back. His other hand swiped up with the combat knife, though Bakugou snuffed it out by catching his wrist. It was a perfect anchor to pull himself further to headbutt the villain, and also served well to slow down his speed enough to plant his feet back to the ground right within striking distance of the fiend. Much to Bulwark's chagrin, Stain barely recoiled from the hit, and countered with a devastating pommel strike to the back of his skull. It caused him to buckle and lurch, his chin making contact with the butcher's knee as he sidestepped the falling boy. The knee strike knocked him back almost upright, bringing him just in line with Stain's knife as it skirted across the young man's collarbone. Blood speckled the cold steel hue of the blade. In an instant, Bakugou's body seized up, and he collapsed on the tarmac. "What the hell?" he yelled despairingly. "What did you do, you son of a bitch? What did you do, damn it?" He attempted to spurn the ground. He tried to force his musculature into overdrive. He pushed and shoved in vain to do so much as stand and fight. He howled and hollered until his vocal cords were threatening to snap like fishing line. Tears of frustration welled up in his eyes. "You're a stalwart one, boy. I'll consider sparing you as I put these fools to rest." His voice was like daggers to Bakugou's ears. He couldn't stand up. He had failed his friends. He had failed that pro-hero propped up against the wall. He had failed Gran Torino and All Might and Aizawa. He had failed himself. As his sword hovered over Ida's jugular, Stain's attention snapped upright once again, and he leapt out of the way of a torrent of ice with the swiftness of a gazelle. The glacier also served to slide the paralyzed group of victims out of the way of Stain's scrutiny. Bakugou found himself at the feet of Shoto Todoroki, frost and a scowl adorning his face. "4 of you," Stain muttered, slashing through the mountain of ice with ease and launching past it. A torrent of hail bounced off of them as he descended with all the zeal of a cult leader harbored within his eyes. Try as he might, Todoroki's ice only served to briefly keep the man away. Fortunately, Midoriya was on his feet before long, and his projectiles wasted no time zipping around the battlefield like angry wasps. They kept him on his toes, as did the ice, so neither could land a clean hit. "Don't worry, guys, we're gonna save you," Todoroki said, glancing down at the 3 still outstretched on the concrete. "This bastard isn't going to touch us. We'll figure out a way to run or keep him occupied until the pros get here." As Todoroki finished his sentence, Midoriya wailed in anguish. Folding knives had burrowed themselves into his right hand and left wrist. He gritted his teeth and sunk to one knee. The hero killer exploited the lapse in Todoroki's focus to close the distance, diving in for a killing blow with his katana. It was centimeters from the boy's throat as the steel faltered and snapped. Ida had finally stood, delivering a recipro-burst strengthened kick to the flat of the blade. It was incapable of handling such monumental stress. Stain hopped back and out of their range, staring down the trio that was standing with a fervent glower. They hadn't injured him, they hadn't even fatigued him. "You're all a monument to the sins of this society. Hypocrites! The streets will run with your blood, you filthy cretins!" he snarled. Bakugou's fingers clawed at the blacktop. "Yeah?" The blonde lifted himself up, heaving from an unrestrained rage. "I'm gonna break that stupid goddamn jaw of yours so you can't spout all that brain-dead nonsense anymore, you stupid piece of shit!" He fought with all of his might, allowing Stain to bury blades in his arms just to disarm him further and further. He picked him apart with the strikes to the body and face, weaving in between his swift, skillful blows. Blood soaked each arm. Each breath was labored. Ida and Midoriya had been paralyzed again, and Todoroki had blades buried beneath his flesh as well. "Todoroki!" the blonde screamed, his voice hectic and strained. "Burn our wounds shut with your fire! At least mine! I can't lose any more blood!" "What?" The prodigy was taken aback at his request. "Just do it!" With a sputter, Todoroki's flames whipped to life and scorched the wounds shut. Bakugou winced. It all culminated in one last clash. Bakugou dove in for a massive hook to Stain's liver, and as he did so, the hero killer slashed upward with his final combat knife. It scored his flesh deeply, a jagged dissection dragging from the meat of his neck to the tip of his jaw. A torrent of crimson shot forth from the wound, particles of blood raining down on every surface and coating the street beneath. Specks dashed against Midoriya's skin as he watched helplessly, his face contorted in horror. Bakugou growled, yanking the vertically mounted knife from the butcher's chest rig and worming it betwixt his ribs. The hero killer howled in agony, staggering back. He leaned up against the wall and watched as the near-lethal strike finally affected the boy. Bakugou's vision blurred to the degree that everything reverted to simple shapes and flashes of color. His legs felt like jelly, their strength giving way instantly. He plunged to the earth. It felt like he couldn't breathe. He strained every muscle in his body to no avail. Was he dying? Were his friends going to die? "Hero killer!" A boisterous voice reverberated throughout the alley. Before the boy slipped unconscious, he made out the unmistakable shape of Endeavor. So that's it, everybody. Thank you all for watching the video to the end. Now, there's a few more things I want to go over before we're done here. First, I want to thank the writer for this video, as well as the editors for this video. Their details will be in the description below. If you're a voice actor, editor, or writer, or you're interested in becoming one of those, go to the Discord that is in the description of this video and hit up the head of one of those departments. We're always looking for members to join us. So that's it from us for today's video. So thank you all for watching, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you're interested, and hit that like button if you like this video. Until next time, peace out everybody, have an amazing day.